It's summer, and many of us know all too well about the scary tales shared around a campfire. Stories that chill you to the core and make you look under the bed before you go to sleep. Author Andrew Pyper knows a thing or two about things that go bump in the night and what it is that is so appealing about these scary stories. And the author of The Damned joins us now. Welcome to the agenda this summer.
Thank you very much.
Okay, set this up. It's called The Damned. What's generally the premise of the new novel?
Well, it's a book about near-death experience. And I tell the story using a set of fraternal twins, Danny and Ashley Orchard, boy and a girl, who both die on their 16th birthdays in a house fire in central Detroit, a place that they're not really supposed to go because they live in the suburbs of Detroit. They both die, but Danny returns to life after briefly being dead, but his sister Ashley does not. She remains dead, and she's not remotely happy about this because she's a very, very bad girl. And so she haunts Danny for his adult life until he falls in love with a single mom and her son, and he has attempts to have a family again, which only makes her all the angrier. She comes back into their lives, and Danny has to die a second time to protect those that he loves.
She basically torments him.
Totally torments him, yes.
Okay, this is set in Detroit, which I'm very curious about. Why is this set in Detroit? What was it about Detroit?
Well, I wanted a place that had a grounded sense of its own failure. You know, I wanted something that looked like the underworld, but in the world that we live in today. And so I considered a number of places, but Detroit, just the magnitude of its abandonment. It's a very haunting place. It's in its own way. It's quite a beautiful place in its kind of scarcity. And also, because Dante's Inferno was one of the texts I was calling upon, given the underworld, 8 Mile Road is the road that kind of is the northern border of Detroit, and there's 9 subsequent circles coming to downtown. The center of the underworld in Dante is a pit of ice, and then, of course, in the case of Detroit, we have the Detroit River, which freezes in winter. So it lined up mythically with the Inferno in the real world.
And realistically, in terms of the sort of feeling that you want to create.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay, so this is somewhat of a departure from your previous books, and you really delve into the supernatural in this book. And it sort of as a caution, I mean, people might be put off by that term in a sense. This book is about more than that. But why the supernatural? What intrigues you so much about that?
I think the supernatural is useful as a writer because it takes you to places where, if you were constrained strictly by realism, you couldn't go. So there's that the fantastical opens up the world for you and allows you to create new worlds. I think as well, in the matter of character, I think stories that invoke fear in both the characters and hopefully also in the reader, I think it shows you aspects of character that, again, a more conventional narrative can't reach. People respond differently to fear than they do to the other human emotions, to grief, to the kind of musings, the everyday musings that we all go through. Fear, in its abruptness and in sometimes its violence, provides revelation of character.
Yeah, this is a scary read at one level. Like, you're freaked out from page 1 till the end, basically.
I hope so.
and Ashley, who's a psychopath in the real, and then comes back to torment her brother on and over again. Do you see her as, because when I think of supernatural, I think of like ghouls, ghosts, demons. How do you see her?
I see her as a sort of a human embodiment of evil, of the demonic. I mean, yes, she, science would say, I suppose, that she's a psychopath, that she lacks certain proteins in the brain. The science attempts in psychiatry and psychology would have their own explanations. But for me, and I think for most people, those explanations, when you're dealing with people who are truly capable of awful actions, Sandy Hook, the Bernardo case, etc., there's something missing from that explanation. I think there's that evil and the idea of the supernatural and offers a bridge between where science ends and where human understanding is left wondering what's missing. It feels like the explanation of science is insufficient.
I'm glad you brought up Sandy Hook, because we have a clip. This is an interview that Steve Paikin did. It's with Father Thomas Rosica, and they were talking about the nature of evil in the context of the Sandy Hook shooting where 26 people were killed. Take a look.
I think the political correctness of our recent times has distorted truth, images, vocabulary, and behavior. And that's really a great part of this. I encounter it every day in the work that I do. Oh no, we can't say that, or you can't name this, or don't use the word evil, and please don't speak about the devil if it's some little guy dressed up with a red suit and horns and a pitchfork. I'm talking about the blatant, ugly face of evil that rears its head now and then. And what it does is make us reflect on our motives, on our behavior, on our actions, and to really go to the heart of what we are and what we do, and how much reviling and hatred and destruction is at work within us. And unless we address those situations, we do no good for humanity.
Okay, Andrew, where are you on this? I mean, are we too reluctant to call things evil?
I think we are. I mean, I think and yet we all, most of us, I think, intuit its existence. We can see its confirmations in human actions, sadly, every day. And so I think we try to shield ourselves from the possibility of something larger or inexplicable through the shawl and comforts that only this can all be explained away through if we just sort of open up the head and look at the brain. Well, oh, there it is. That's where evil is. I think that we still have mythology. We still have fiction. We look to those sources because we need help. We need help to understand some aspects of human behavior that science, again, has either neglected to answer or cannot answer.
Is evil then a way to explain it? I take your point, but is it too simplistic of a way to explain things that we don't understand through things like science?
I would say that evil is a very complex answer. I think it's one that, you know, my previous novel, The Demonologist, I was researching demonology in different religions. And what I learned was that in all the major world religions, they have different heads of state, as it were. They have different practices. But one commonality running through them all is the existence of the demonic. And I thought, well, maybe the reason that they have this feature is that demons are real in some sense, that they've always walked with us, that they are always nudging or taking the vulnerable and pushing them in the wrong direction, that it is in fact a real occurrence in human existence to hear that voice in your head. And that voice is not yourself, nor is it a side effect of a disease.
And as you write horror, in that genre, there is, and almost, well, in the canon of horror, an obsession with evil. Tie that together for me.
Well, I think evil is an obsession because we encounter it, and we can't control it, and we fear it. You know, I have 2 young kids, and I was walking them to school the other day, and this guy sort of passed by twice. He went around the block twice and kind of looked, I thought, looked at my kids in a sort of wrong way. And there it was, a block away from my home, and I felt that there in that rumbling Ford F-150 was an embodiment of evil, looking at my children. And so I think we all have versions of that, right? We live in large cities for the most part where we don't know even our own neighbors. And so those anxieties, I think, give rise to, and frequently we see enacted events that can only be explained, or at least we're tempted to explain them through something that again goes beyond just like, well, this happens sometimes, or she must have had a disease.
Right, okay. Where does your interest in all this stem? So you talk about your kids, and there you are as an adult saying, you know, is that evil what I'm seeing? Or that's what leaps into my head. For you, where did this begin? Where does your interest in evil go back to?
Well, first of all, I love writing stories, and scary stories are something that I've always enjoyed reading, and so I've always aspired to write them. So that I should admit first, they're fun to write. But I think as well, it's a very personal, it's a personal journey for me to try to come to an understanding of where the mythical, which has always been with us, right? I mean, we've always had ways in God's stories that try to explain death, where we go after we die, why are some people bad and other people good. And my first novel was born out of the Bernardo case. I mean, it was written for me as a response to something that we all reacted the same way. You know, it was so saddening and so awful, and it made me angry, and I couldn't understand how these 2 normal-seeming people could do these things. And so I wrote a novel about ghosts and about accountability and about evil, that it is in fact real.
And as you start from that novel to here, I mean, that was a horror in a realistic sense. This is a horror in a fictional sense. Was it for you, I want to talk about evil and demons, was that line just a straight line, then therefore I'm going to write horror stories?
It was less self-conscious than that. I think, you know, looking back on the last couple of novels, they are less concerned with horror than they are concerned with mythology. So in the case of The Demonologist, my interest was the demonic. How do demons exist today? What kind of cover would they assume if they were around in the 21st century. So I propose that, you know, if demons are real, that they would be quite happy to have themselves explained away as brain chemical problems or psychiatric definitions. I mean, that could be a cover. You know, one man's psychotic might be another man's demonic possession. So I wanted to write about demons in a real, grounded way today and how they affect my characters in an emotional way.
And I mean, it fits in sort of the zeitgeist of our times. If you just, you know, I said in the introduction, if you look at movies and films, things like The Avengers, Walking Dead, horror, The Avengers, superheroes, Divergent series in books, it seems to be, if demons have been around forever, what is it about this time we live in that we seem to be so into this?
Well, I think horror, as well as genre fiction generally, has always been good at being the canary in the coal mine when it comes to social anxieties. So, zombies, Walking Dead, a cable show about zombies. You wouldn't really think when it first aired that it was going to be the giant success that it is. And I think it taps into a fear or a worry a lot of us have, again, in enlarging cities where we don't know our neighbors. You get on the subway and you sort of feel that tension. It's too crowded. There's too many people on the street. There's road rage. And you sort of think, if we just took one piece of this social contract out, if we let things lose control, how quickly we would turn into survivalists. And so I think zombies are an interest because we have an anxiety about living with so many people around us that are just this close to being threatening.
You know, Alex Garland's 28 Days Later. I remember seeing that. I think it came out 12 years ago or something. And it was really the first time I was like, zombies are real. I mean, I'm actually fearful of this becoming a reality in a strange way. And we sort of seem to have taken off of that. And The Walking Dead, of course, hugely popular. We did a show, Steve did a show on the popularity of zombies, and he talked to Arnold T. Bloomberg, who's from the University of Baltimore, and he talked about what's behind the climate sort of that's behind all this popularity.
Do you think 9/11 is kind of the key moment in history on this?
Oh, definitely for the most recent resurgence, absolutely. I mean, like a lot of things, things are not always black and white. There are a lot of movies that certainly fans themselves will say that fall outside of this particular track. And really, if you think about it, you could expand this phenomenon to taking a look at the horror genre in general, because horror in general is a genre that people gravitate toward when they need that catharsis during times of crisis. So for instance, the great classic Universal horror movies from the 30s happens all around the Depression and World War II. But like we're saying here tonight, the zombie in particular is a perfect metaphor because it's the closest to us. It's your family, it's your friends, it's yourself turning into this creature.
What do you think of that? Do we lean on zombies because they're the other side of us?
I think so, yes, and I think we find ourselves in settings increasingly. The Eaton Center food court.
The shooting there.
The shooting there, but also just on an everyday you sort of see there's just too many people here, you know. And you start to stop seeing people as people. And you see them as, you know, just a turn of the prism, and you see that, you know, the sort of the Walking Dead. I think similarly, you know, the idea of plague and dystopian fiction, of course, is another big literary theme of the moment. And I think it is because of overpopulation again, the concern of, you know, whether it's Ebola or, you know, when these new or old diseases rise, you see this explosion of media interest. That's not just, I think, opportunism. I think it's providing us with this, it's feeding an already existing fear about, okay, what if this system fails? What am I going to do? How am I going to protect my family? That, again, that survivalist possibility returns.
And you know, that sort of speaks to this communal, the societal fear that I go back to that word, the sort of zeitgeist, that we're all kind of collectively scared of the world that we live in. But there's this individual anxiety and fear that you tap into as well. So how does that resonate with you?
Well, I like to write, my horror isn't large scale like that, so it's typically very familial, it's typically emotionally driven, and I think that's what I've sort of set out as my challenge, is to write scary stories, supernatural stories that are nevertheless driven by emotion, by feeling, by typically the bonds between people. I'm not really interested in just seeing people die in interesting ways. I'm interested in how fear changes character or challenges character. So in the case of the Damned, we have Danny who literally must die a second time for those people he loves, which is a very old story in a way, right? I mean, Greek mythology has people braving the underworld, going to where the dead reside, and trying to return with someone, retrieve them armed only with love, you know, these impossible journeys. So I wanted to recreate an old myth, but set it in the present day and recast it.
And also, I mean, some people are put off by this idea of being supernatural and coming back from the dead. You tap into like the realistic human emotion that we have. You talk about family and the loss of family and someone being the other within your family. This talks about real things that resonate beyond the supernatural.
Yeah, I think it has to. I think for a novel, any novel, whether it's a genre novel or any other kind of novel, it needs to have something that resonates on the human level. It can't simply be a demonstration of awful things, or a compendium of horrors, or a sort of collection of death. That's just sort of pornography of a kind.
And it's interesting about Ashley, because if we sort of just put her in the category of being evil, I mean, she's more layered, she's more complex. You have some compassion for Ashley. You can't just kind of dismiss her as this crazy lunatic. She does come back to spend time with her family in a weird way.
Well, twins are like that. I mean, one of my dearest friends has fraternal twins, and I've observed them their whole lives, and they have this relationship where they are constantly at war. I mean, you could throw out a paperclip between them, and they will fight over the paperclip. And yet, if there's an external threat, a third party who is trying to discipline them or coming from the outside, they will stick up for each other fiercely. Their love is fierce, even though it looks like they're about to kill each other. And I think that, I love that idea. I think a lot of families are built on that, right? I mean, we drive each other crazy, but we love each other so deeply.
When there's an external threat, we pull together like nothing. With the internal threats, we will duke them out. I know this well. I have twins. They're young, but they're already fighting over that paperclip. So as a writer, as you're trying to approach these themes and tell a greater good or a greater lesson, you're also sort of challenged with this idea. I'm writing horror. It needs to be, as you said, it's exciting to write. So how do you balance, when you're approaching this, being entertaining, capturing people's imaginations and attention, with tapping into these deeper, really more complex anxieties of us?
Well, I think it's about, I serve the story. I feel it's a bit mystical, and maybe it is, but I feel that once the story occurs to you and you kind of map it out a bit, it takes on a life of its own. It's its own independent organism that you are feeding and nurturing and hoping that it grows. And so in the case of a scary story, I mean, what I do is try to kind of find scary things that are everyday, small scale. So there's a scene in the novel where I knew that something scary had to happen to my main character, who was housebound. He couldn't leave the house. And I thought, well, what's scary in a house? And I thought about the blender, no, bit obvious. The bathtub, psycho, been done. And I ended up, we can't do that. So I ended up in the laundry room, and I constructed no spoilers, but I constructed a scary scene using a tumble dryer. And I love that. I love being able to kind of create scares and twisting reality on everyday things that people encounter all the time.
No, I'm scared. I'm scared of my dryer.
I've
always been scared of the washer.
Get someone else to do the laundry now.
Okay, I want to, you've gotten really good reviews from this book, and your last one did really well on bestsellers list. And you've been compared, which must be a high compliment to the likes of, like, are you the next Stephen King? Is this where we're sort of,
yes,
like,
of course.
high compliment? But at the same time, you've sort of been put in this position of, I don't want to say defending, but balancing what we sort of have stereotypes about horror fiction and literary fiction. And I kind of want to talk to you about sort of those parallels and where you draw the comparison. So first of all, are you concerned that people might take your work less seriously because you write horror?
I think it used to be a concern of mine. I used to get quite anxious about these categories and finding myself in the right one. I feel less so now for a couple of reasons. One is I think that we've changed, the idea of genre is more fluid than it used to be. I think we are increasingly living in a post-genre era where we can have writers who are writing, like myself, I think, writing crossover novels that are hopefully nourishing, that have real characters, that are provocative to the mind, but at the same time, yes, are page-turning entertainments with scares. And that those two things aren't mutually exclusive. I think secondly, I think it's where that comes from, where part of the prejudice against genre comes from, is this idea that seriousness, serious fiction, has to be either sort of looked at in the past or maybe kind of considered in the present. And there's various constraints. It has to be real. It kind of is this very small, very conservative way of looking at literature, whereas I see it, I think there's huge possibilities in the fantastical, in the mythological.
Well, we see it, you know, not that you're not a giant or to be a giant, but the giants of literary fiction, the Atwoods, I was talking to Kazuo Ishiguro about, you know, they have adopted these sort of tropes of sci-fi and fantasy. Station 11, which was nominated for the National Fiction Award last year. It seems to me, to make your point a little bit more, that it's becoming a little more respectable.
Yeah, I think it is becoming more respectable, and I think those writers are find these different tropes, whether it's, you know, in Atwood's case, dystopian fiction, Ishiguro's case, the fantasy. I think because there's huge opportunities there. I think they want to expand, and they see that I don't think it's a dumbing down at all. I don't think it's a case of writers becoming cynical. On the contrary, I think they are challenging themselves to use existing ways of storytelling, again, the fantastical, the dystopian, the science fictional, and employing their talents and taking that form to hopefully the next level. I think it's, so again, I don't see a border between these worlds. I just see now, you know, the wall has been, you know, destroyed, and people are traveling between these borders more freely.
Okay, you may think there are others who are critical of sort of this, not of the line blurring, but this sort of defense of the line blurring. So I want to read something from the New Yorker. This is from Arthur Crystal, essayist. Long little clip here I'm going to read here, but here we go. Great writers hit us over the head because they present characters whose imaginary lives have real consequences, at least while we're reading about them. And because they see the world in much the way we do, complicated by surface and subterranean feelings, by ambiguity and misapprehension, and by the misalliance of consciousness and perception. Writers who want to understand why the heart has reasons that reason cannot know are not going to write horror tales or police procedurals. Why say otherwise? Elmer Leonard, Ross Thomas, and the wonderful George MacDonald Fraser craft stories that every discerning reader can enjoy to the hilt. But make no mistake, and here's the point, good commercial fiction is inferior to good literary fiction in the same way that Santa Claus is inferior to Wotan. One brings us fun or frightening gifts, and the other requires and repays observance. What do you think of that critique? I mean, is there merit in that critique, or is that just an old trope that we sort of stood by?
I don't think there's very much merit in that critique. I mean, it's one thing to say that some genre fiction is poorly written and shallow, but I could, you know, demonstrate. I could go to the nearest bookstore and bring back 20 examples of shallow, inadequate, poorly written literary fiction just as quickly. So I don't think it's a matter. It's a qualitative. I don't think it's a qualitative difference between literary and genre fiction. And furthermore, I think genre fiction can just as easily, and frankly, if not more powerfully, demonstrate the present day human condition, all of the things that he is talking about, that that the ingredients that good fiction should demonstrate. I think that genre fiction can. Because
you have a broader license, because you can go to places that you're not confined by in literary fiction.
Yes, that's part of it, and I think as well it's merely it turns not on the genre but the skill of the writer. A good writer in any genre can create something that is that is edifying and useful and socially relevant and politically strident and can, is helpful in the discourse. Or a poor writer can write something that isn't of much worth at all. It doesn't turn on the genre, it turns on the story and the writer.
And yet some people listening, and arguably I might say young people, would say, like, leave my horror genre alone, right? Like, this is different than sort of the canon of literary fiction, and it has its own merits, which you've spoken to, but we don't want this to be sort of diluted into mainstream. Do you worry about that?
I don't worry about that, but I sympathize with their point of view. That, like, why do we have to be having this debate anyway? I enjoy these books. I don't care about what someone says in an essay in the New York or elsewhere. I like scary stories, and if they scare me, they're good. If they don't, they fail. I'm perfectly happy with people who feel that way, and I hope that my books will please them. But I don't think it's necessarily a case that it's either or. I think those people can be satisfied by a story that at the same time provides something nourishing and more serious in its themes and in its writing.
And as you explore these things, these themes in the Dam, at the end of the day, what do you want me as a reader to sort of surmise, take away, learn from it?
Well, I want you to be excited by it primarily. I want you to have an experience.
Exciting.
Oh, good.
It's freaky.
I want to keep you up late. No, I really, and I mean that. I think there's something about. I want the experience to be really visceral. I want you to feel that fear, and for that fear to pull you in a way that is very intimate. I want to make the book a space that is intimate and custom made for each reader. And then, if you're there, then I think you'll see how you react to those fears, what makes you anxious about this story. And I think that will reveal things in readers that, again, a sort of quieter, more subdued, cotton-balled literary piece of fiction won't reveal to you. It won't give it to you the same way.
It's been nice talking to you. The book's done very well. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Help TVO create a better world through the power of learning. Visit supporttvo.org and make a tax-deductible donation today.